Good evening, guys. Ken at Tortoise Capital, nightly strategy podcast for March 14th, 2024. The Ides of March are upon us tomorrow. As Shakespeare reminds us, beware of yon Cassius with his lean and hungry look. There will be wolves in the market tomorrow. So we'll start with Alcoa, 30-minute charts, hybrid swing portfolio. Today was a decisive downward move across the board in most symbols. Should have been well prepared for that. Here's the rollover at a normal resistance level in Alcoa. We get yesterday's close was right here, gaps down to here. There's the PSAR flip, standard risk box, sells off to the reversal in the RL10. So I take the exit at the skin of the dragon for 1R. Standard work. AI. This was a collapsing dragon, speculative entry in the usual way with the standard risk box. That's the same risk box that I always use, and it's sold off harshly. At this point, I thought really hard about cashing it. This was one of the few that I elected to hold overnight on the short side, with 1R in hand, just because it's AI and has more punishment in store. Cliff, no trade. I ran out of capital on the, or I'm sorry, there was Caterpillar, ran out of capital in the afternoon. Plus the sell-off was not nearly as pronounced as other things that were easier, like Cliff, which had a collapsing dragon and a PSAR flip right after the open with a standard risk, and it just dropped like a rock. And then in the last half hour, it bounced from the low of the day across the RL10, and that was enough for a 3R win. No overnight risk. CVS was one of the few that worked. That's a 1-2-3 entry in the morning and crossing the dragon, standard risk. And it wanted to keep going in the afternoon, but I decided to reduce overnight risk and cashed 4R. DIA, collapsing dragon, orderly exit, 2R. Disney, 1-2-3 entry in the morning after a huge gap down and sell off. Actually, the gap down was here, then dropped like a stone. Then a 1-2-3 entry after it crossed the VWAP, and the VWAP had started to rise. And I took an R out of it when it got back to the Bollinger Band mean, no overnight risk. Devon Energy. Yeah, let me just say that on Disney, I was going to get out of this before the close of the day, and there was just no reason to get out until the last half hour. Devon Energy was a COTA 2 for a scratch. Emerging markets, standard short on a collapsing dragon, and it went below the 5-day anchored VWAP. Standard risk 1R. ETHE, I tried the 1-2-3 entry, took a 1R loss. Mexico continued yesterday's explosive move with a COTA 2 and cashed 1R when it came back to the VWAP and was happy to get out of that trade. Mexico, or Brazil, excuse me, collapsing dragon for an R. Intel, no trade. International paper, no trade. IYR, huge gap down, speculate in, standard risk box, dropped like a stone and kept failing. I took a 1-2 exit at the skin of the dragon for 4R. That'll be in play tomorrow. Coca-Cola. This was one that we got into yesterday. We were holding 1R in hand, and it gave us a big gap down and ended up taking 1.5R loss. So they got us on that one. KRE made up for it. We held this one short overnight with 2R in hand. It gapped down and sold off hard, so I added a second position. When it crossed the 30-minute or the 30 period anchored VWAP and then collapsed further, added a third position. Now at this point, you got a policy decision to make. It has shown no signs of recovery whatsoever during the day. You got 3 positions in. You're holding about 9R, and that's what the long term, it's testing the bottom of this support level. And if that collapses, it's going to come down to the 10-day low and the 270 period anchored VWAP. So if you've got 9R in hand right there, what do you do? Do you add another short position? Do you hold what you have? Do you sell one or more of those positions? Do you get out of it altogether? I got out of it altogether. I just felt like, man, I felt myself being greedy, getting the third position on, and I didn't want to go too far. McDonald's this was yesterday's trade to here, and then we held that short. It gapped down, so I added a second position, and then it exited everything here for about 9R. It came all the way down to the 270-day anchored VWAP. That felt like a perfect trade. This shows promising moves for tomorrow with a bunch of people buying McDonald's on sale. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that work tomorrow. Merck, everything was rolling over, so I got short, and that turned into 4R. Microsoft, gap up, emerging dragon, no resistance anywhere in sight. I couldn't wait to get out of that on a 1-2 exit for 1, 2, 3, 4R. One of the few things that worked on the long side. Marijuana, no trade. Nike, rolled over 3R. Nvidia, no trade. Oracle, no trade. I'm just starting to track that one. Clean energy. So this was the re-entry yesterday, and it closed really well for us with an R in hand. It continued to sell off today, so I added a second position, and then as it dropped like a stone, a third position, closed right here. This is one I am holding overnight because it's a sector and there's no compelling reason to buy it. The only people buying that sector would be government intervention, and they're not spending money right now. So that's one that I am willing to hold overnight because it's a sector and not a company. Palantir, no trade. Rivian, this was one I got greedy on. So we started this collapsing dragon yesterday as it tested the 30-day, I'm sorry, the 10-day anchored VWAP. Today it gapped down, collapsing dragon, second position, third position, fourth position, all out with 9R, and a nice fitting end to the day. This was my brother's stock of interest yesterday. This gapped all the way up above 10, sold off this far when I finally woke up $1 later and shorted with 50-cent risk and collected 3R on a routine exit at the skin of the dragon after it came all the way back to the Bollinger Band mean. That is the reversion to the mean trade in all its glory. The S&P was weak all day. That last half hour, though, brought it all the way back up to the midpoint. But when it was down here at the low of the day, it was looking bad. Treasuries, interestingly, also sold off hard. So it's not even a flight to quality. So you can't even say that that's the idea. I mean, the reason to buy treasuries now is because of the yield. Walmart, I thought hard about getting short here, but there were other easier, more natural shorts, so I left it alone. Its span of control issues didn't play along, but that's one that I would be looking at on the long side for tomorrow. It closed above the 5-day anchored VWAP, and which is rising, so that's all good. And that's the 10-day and that's the 30-day. So this is still in a long, strong mode. So if there's any recovery tomorrow, Walmart would be an early tell and an early trade. US Steel, collapsing dragon, had to and picked up 4 in an hour. And then XLI, the industrials, caught a 2 short, picked up an R off the rebound, off the low, and was content with that. Very good day on the short side. But again, about all of the trades except 2, I cashed, so I wanted to minimize my overnight risk. This is the sniper trade of the day, so now we're on 3 minutes. Here's where it closed yesterday with that nice tight risk box. Here was the gap up, sold off to the OR3, reversed higher. I'm long from there. This is the R10 in Microsoft, meaning that there's 9 more of those to the upside on a range stat move, times 9 to the upside. So if that works, it could be great. Starts working nicely. I end up exiting here. So that blue box shows the maximum adverse excursion. That's how much I gave back. This is how much I kept. That's how much I risked. So that's about 2R. And at one point, this was probably 4R. So we gave back 2 on that move and kept 2. That feels like a good trade. Not trying to squeeze more out of it. Caught a 2 re-entry, standard risk. Maximum adverse return was 1R, so I kept 2 out of that, 2 out of the 3. Caught a 2, scratch. It was up 1R at one point and then came back. So that's about 4R. Here's the traders. Hamad 1.8 on NVIDIA. Nice work in here. So gaps down to here, runs up, rolls over, gets the new low of the day, so he's short, standard risk, cashes it, tries a couple, wins on this one. So yeah, that looks pretty good. Total of 1.8 for the day. Yeah, I thought this was a little, that's a reasonable shot right there. Oops. And I really like this one because it was such a horrible day and it rejected the VWAP and rolled over. So he gets one last little taste for 1.2, which paid for all of these other ventures. So that's pretty good stuff right there. Brings home 2.7 out of Tesla. Just about perfect. Now, I want to comment here. Let's see. On trade one, he says, I closed early because I realized I'd enter at the edge of the Z3 line. You got to remember the Z3 is so pinched because of yesterday's very compressed range box that as soon as you get a large decisive move, it takes a long time for that 30 period Bollinger Band to expand. So that's always going to be the case. That should not stop you. You got to remember that if this is the high of the day, your range stat move is way down here. So you are not anywhere near in danger of chasing. You want to take that one short. And then you would normally get this exit right here, which would add another R to your 2.7. So this is a great re-entry. Now you got a COTA 2 with the lower highs. It rejected the VWAP twice. Second position, when it doesn't even get through the declining PSAR, can't even get through there to get back to the VWAP. It rolls over, so he gets short a second one and crushes that. That's really good. Then stays out of the chop, waits for the range expansion to the downside, the direction of the day, and nails that. Yeah, perfect day in Tesla. Rivian, that opening range 3 was available. May have been a span of control, but there's a short here instead of there, which makes that 1.6 instead of 0.6, and then turns this into a 0.5 day. But that's pretty good work all the way through. It never really materialized to a big painful sell-off after that first downward move. Everything else was kind of choppy. So you did fine on that. Cliff 0.8. This one here feels like should have been a stop and reverse. Maybe, oh, I think it was, I'm sorry, it was. So he cashed it and then that was a re-entry and then cashed it. Okay, that's why that was so good. Got it. George, good job here. I like the re-entry right after this cover. Because the day was so bad, there were some opportunities. This ended up net scratching. Let's see, where's the other one? Did I miss one? Yeah, oh, those two. And then in my brother, his trailing stop in SOUN hit. So he ends up getting 5R total out of the 2 positions from yesterday, making nice bank on that one. So volatility works in both directions. Get the daily report up here in a second. Oops, wrong one. Sorry. We're right at the crucial price level at the PSAR, right at the critical state to preserve that whole move. It's had 5 days to break out and it hasn't. So now you got to say, is tomorrow, do we see the first serious run at the downside? I think that's what today was a warning for a reversion to the mean, which is over here around 505. And if that breaks, look out below. But a 1% sell-off tomorrow brings it all the way back here and erases all of the gains from the last 10 days. So that's how quickly it can change. And it was only that last half hour that took the price from here back up to here. Otherwise, it was going to close here right at the test level. And that's in range tomorrow, 504, I guess that is. Yeah. That's the 10-day low right there. So there's not much support in here. Yeah, bullish normal creeping in, long-term strength, but seeing some weakness on the 2 and the 10-day. Volatility still pointing to the possibility of downside moves. Reminder, risk off. Exaggerated volatility condition. In the modified Dow here, weakness in Boeing and McDonald's and Merck, weakness in Tesla. That's crucial. That's sabotaging everything else. Pockets of strength in Devon Energy, which is narrowly constructed. Microsoft finally had a recovery, and ExxonMobil and energy. So not much joy in this thing. I do think Walmart price action suggests we should keep an eye on that tomorrow. Agriculture and inflation, it's above $23. Real weakness today in clean energy. I'm ready for that just to keep getting murdered. It's only propped up by government bailouts and subsidies. So oil was up, energy was up, and pretty much nothing else. Still a lone bright light there in Mexico. It can't stay up by itself, so I'd be cautious about over optimism in that. The usual. Big sell-offs today, huge weakness. That's your weakness. If you're targeting things to be short, there you are. The very few signs of strength, very narrow. Everything else is just getting murdered. I mean, look how bad Euro Asia blend, the globals at minus 150 got murdered, whereas the S&P was down. The globals are much more vulnerable to short side. So if you have to get short, that's the place to start looking. Those international indexes. The rollover continues. It's now getting decisive. Testing. And that's what we got for tomorrow. Tactical Friday tomorrow, fellas. Let's be ready for it. Sharpen your knives. And let's get them tomorrow.